What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here. Back again talking college football. It's already week 5. Today, we are going to be getting into all the marquee games ahead of this week's action. But before we get started, if you like the show, and subscribe to the channel. Those things help us a ton. Thank you if you've done that. We're a small channel trying to grow, and it really does matter. It helps a ton. Last thing, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. We will be talking sides and totals. And first show of the week, we do a G5 episode, a Greasy Games episode on Friday. Request below if you have them. We will take them, and we will get to as many games as possible. But let's dive in. Elite matchups in week 5. This is going to be so sick. We'll begin with Alabama taking on Georgia. 3-point spread in favor of the home Georgia Bulldogs. The total in the game is 52.5. A lot to get into with both of these squads, who I would argue have disappointed. Alabama obviously had the Florida State blowout loss where nothing really went in their favor other than maybe a missed field goal and a couple turnover on downs. You flip those, they still lose, but maybe by not as much. And since then, they beat up on Louisiana, Monroe, and Wisconsin. I think that Wisconsin win is not aging as well as maybe it could have, considering what Wisconsin's looked like after their blowout loss to Maryland. Now, still at an average margin of victory of 45. You want to say they exceeded expectations, and I would argue that they haven't. Meanwhile, Georgia beat Marshall and Austin Peay before that crazy shootout against Tennessee where they barely win. They actually have a 24% chance to win the game. They were at a 5.8 to 7.1 yards per play disadvantage. It really just took a crazy late game effort from a lot of players, Zachariah Branch, London Humphreys, and they needed Tennessee to miss the game-winning field goal from 43 yards, which was manageable, which is how we get here. Georgia undefeated, Bama with 1 loss, both teams coming off a bye. Injuries in the game, Alabama's Jam Miller and Tim Keenan are expected to return, 2 big additions for them. Georgia, very injured on the offensive line. Ernest Green, Juan Gaston, Dontrell Glover, they've all been in and out of the lineup. They should be back after the bye, so we will see on that. Let's begin with Alabama's offense and Ty Simpson taking on Georgia's defense. Since the Florida State game, it's been pretty good for Simpson. The only real criticism I have is he still misses some pretty clear wide open throws. We saw that against Wisconsin, especially on the 4th down in the first quarter, where they end up with a turnover on downs, missed a wide open. I believe it was Jeremy Bernard just right downfield. So he's still not quite reading defenses. That's probably going to be an issue against better teams, which Georgia is. Overall, since the Florida State game, he's been excellent. 72% completion, 9.7 yards per attempt. He only has 1 turnover-worthy play on the year. He is mobile, just not using it very often. 2.6 yards per carry. Only 4 sacks taken, which is fine. Drops have been a problem for this team at times, largely Ryan Williams. They have dropped 8.5% of Ty Simpson's passes. But we still think this pass game, even just the skill positions in general, have a ceiling for more than what they've shown. Bernard has outplayed Ryan Williams to this point, a lot of that coming down to drops for Ryan Williams, but we still have seen the flashes and the stop-start ability for the young sophomore who just turned 18. Saw that against Wisconsin, so better days ahead most likely. Your role players are Isaiah Horton and a ton of 5-star recruits like Latsier Brooks. So it's a deep pass game, very good skill players there. Run game gets back Jam Miller, which is important because this run game has been awful. My real question is he a difference maker? We saw him last year, he wasn't. So did the year of experience, training in the offseason really help? He's coming off a collarbone, so he hasn't been doing a ton. I don't know. We'll see on this. The O-line was expected to be a top 4 unit heading into the season. They've already had to move some pieces around. We've seen Michael Carroll, their 5-star freshman, get some reps over Wilkin Formby. The guard positions are also unsettled. They've consistently been playing 3 of them. A lot of that because Jaden Roberts was hurt in the preseason. So you've had to see Dewberry, and it's unsettled. It's led to their underachievement. They're 52nd in pass blocking, 83rd in run blocking. That they've not played like a top 4 offensive line in the SEC. There is a ceiling for more. They're just too talented. And Caden Proctor's a stud. Like freshman 5-star Michael Carroll probably will be someday. He's just young. Just leaves a lot to be desired. But fortunately, we talk about underachieving units. I'm not sure there's been an SEC unit that's underachieved more than Georgia's pass rush. They're 124th this defense has kind of just been a mess. And coming into the season, I always want to highlight what the expectations were and if they've lived up to them or underachieved. Georgia's underachieved, but we thought this unit might be a slight concern, and that largely was in the secondary with players like Daniel Harris and Aguero coming back. They were issues last year. They've been issues again this year, which is concerning because KJ Bolden's been good. Dalen Everett's a stud. What we've seen Georgia do is kind of rotate in players like Ellis Robinson, their 5-star freshman, and that would help because right now 2 to 3 positions in the secondary are unsettled. The defensive backs got absolutely mossed by Chris Brazell in this Tennessee offense. They had 10.3 yards per attempt. And a lot of it wasn't positioning problems. They were in position. It's players just getting out physical at the catch point and falling down and not getting their head around. The bigger concern for me is not the secondary. It's what this pass rush has put on film. 124th in pass rush efficiency. There's no edge whatsoever so far. Now, defensive line is full of 5 stars, 4 stars. There is absolutely no excuse for this. I would bet that this team does get it together. We've seen it many seasons in a row. It's a small sample. 2 games against Marshall and FCS Austin P where you didn't need to try. But at least the red flags are up. Not sure what Georgia's defense has become. We will see. This is the biggest test they've had so far. On the other side, new quarterback for Georgia as well with Gunnar Stockton. He has a 71% completion percentage, 8.1 yards per attempt. 3 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. He is mobile to 124 yards. That's 4.4 yards per carry. 4 sacks for him on a 28% pressure rate. There's some good with the bad in Gunnar Stockton's game. He's more of a chance taker than Ty Simpson to this point. We've seen it with some crazy runs and the turnover-worthy plays. But that also comes with the big-time throws. That's how you get those game-winning drives with touchdown passes to London Humphreys and Zachariah Branch. One of them was a 2-point conversion to get you in overtime. But anyway, his skill players are also very good, and largely they mirror Bama's. Zachariah Branch, Colby Young have been awesome at wide receiver. They have a deep tight end room, and the run game is disappointed. Nate Frazier's at 4.8 yards per carry. They were getting some juice out of Dwight Phillips, but he got hurt. We don't know if he's going to play in this game. And part of the problem, the run game has struggled, similar to Bama. The offensive line is underachieved. So we had Bama as the 4th best offensive line in the conference. We had Georgia is the 5th. Unlike Bama, it's been injuries that have crushed Georgia. We mentioned Ernest Green, Gaston. They should be back after the bye. Both these teams off the bye, so I think the health will be better. But we just don't know at this point. Haven't seen it because those injuries happened immediately in week 1. As for Bama's defense, this was projected to be the top defense in the entire country for us, which makes this a very hard evaluation. When you go back and watch the film, which you don't even have to really watch the film, just log on to good old Twitter and you're going to see the motivation problems, the effort problems that Bama had in week 1, which is really hard to evaluate with like players jogging all over the field. Is this a coaching issue? Was it just a slow game? Because it appears they've rebounded 2 excellent games against UL Monroe and Wisconsin. What does that mean? Wisconsin had their backup quarterback and they're not a good offense to begin with. So it's a very tough evaluation. But what you can say is the D-line is full of 5 stars everywhere, going all the way deep even to guys like Keon Keeley and Yanze Pierre. They're getting back Tim Keenan. That should stretch the Georgia offensive line. The linebackers are awesome. The secondary is full of 5 stars. On paper, this is the most talented defense in the country. Now, most talented does not mean best. Coaching, development, those things matter. And Bama comes in 126th in pass rush. That's inexcusable with these 5 stars. Coverage has been actually okay. Run defense has been okay. But failing to, like, LT Overton, Quay Russaw, Yanze Pierre, and Keon Keeley are all 5 stars. Inside, James Smith is a 5-star. No excuse. No excuse. But overall, when you get to this game and talk about all of the potential advantages for both teams, I just come away thinking Alabama has more. You look at the defense, Alabama has more talent, really at every position group. Offensive line, Alabama has more talent and they're healthier at this point. Skill position group is very close. Honestly, I would probably give it to Georgia considering Alabama's weakness at running back. And then Zachariah Branch, Colby Young versus Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard. That's close. Quarterback, give the slight edge to Alabama right now. Very close. but both these teams have had some pretty easy opponents. Ty Simpson's the one that's looked better. Taking the +3, I think, is fine. We took a +3.5 with Bama. Honestly, if I were you, I'd probably, if you want to bet this game on the Bama side, I would probably just wait for a 3.5. Worst case scenario, you end up with a 3 come kickoff, or maybe you have to buy 3.5 if it's really important to you. It's important enough to me where I would just wait on this. I think 3 is okay to take, but I don't think you need to take this now. It seems like this line is just going to hang right around that efficient mark. As for the total, I would be leaning under. Both of these defenses come in underrated after showing some lapses early in the season. Pacing, not really in your favor in this game. So that is where we will lean under, and we took Bama +3. Oregon, Penn State, the second of our elite games. Penn State is currently favored by 3 points. The total is 53. I believe this is a night game. Is this a whiteout game? I think so. Leave it in the comments, but I'm pretty sure this is one of their, I can just Google this. Penn State whiteout game. Anyway, this is a huge game for them. No. Oh, yeah, it is. It is the whiteout game. Anyway, huge game, and we've seen both of these teams entirely untested. Oregon smashed Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Oregon State. Same thing for Penn State. Nevada, FIU, and Villanova, they had a bye last week, so that is a difference with the scheduling stuff. Let's just dive right into it. There's no real major injuries, at least ones that we can predict, because both teams hold out key players when they're playing these wasted time schedules. So with Oregon on the road, Dante Moore, I would argue it's his first really big road start. He has a 74.5% completion percentage, 10.1 yards per attempt, 7 big-time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play. I think the sample size is large enough with Oregon's offense right now, going back to Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel, where we know what the offense is going to do. They will put players in position to succeed. This is about the easiest offense for your quarterback in general. Easiest is probably not the right way to say it. Friendliest. They have a low ADOT. They let their skill position players who are elite do the work in space by design. So that is going to be a feather in Dante Moore's cap throughout the entire year. We've seen a lot of these stats so far mirror what previous quarterbacks have done. He's up to 6.2 yards per carry as well. He's not taking a lot of sacks. He only has 1 on the entire season. And that speaks to the skill players and the offensive line. This was projected to be the second best offensive line coming into the season. And that was with 3 transfers from lower levels: Isaiah World, Alex Harkey, and Emmanuel Pregnon. I know he's from USC. But they've been first in pass blocking, 48th in run blocking. And I like to just talk about the expectation because they faced nobody, so that is important. The expectation was good play. And the skill players, this was kind of going to come down to what they got out of 5-star DeCorian Moore after Evan Stewart gets hurt in the preseason. He has been everything and more. He's getting involved in the blocking game, leads the team in receiving. We've seen the big plays. And there's still some complimentary pass catchers. Kenyon Sadiq, a dynamic tight end. Veterans like Gary Bryant. It's an excellent pass-catching group. And the running backs, we haven't really gotten a great look at them. They've played a huge rotation because they've been slaughtering teams. They have 2 players over 11 yards per carry, including Noah Whittington, who's their presumed starter at this point. Mekhi Hughes hasn't even been involved. So it's a good run game. And Penn State on the other side, their defense projected to be a very good unit. They have not played an opposing offense ranked higher than 96th. So this is a little bit tricky. We still expected them to be a top 4 unit coming into the Big Ten, with their biggest weakness coming up front. And that is just because you have some departures, including Abdul Carter, top 5 NFL pick. But so far, everything for Penn State's been top 15: coverage, run defense, pass rush. So that's expected. Now they have their toughest test against Oregon. We still think this defense is talented enough to give them a lot of problems, especially on the back end. And the offensive line for Oregon is going to have their work cut out for them again. On the other side, Drew Aller, returning starter, hasn't always looked pretty through the first couple games. 65% completion percentage, 7.1 yards per attempt, 1 big-time throw, 2 turnover-worthy plays, 1 interception. Not running a ton either. Makes sense when you're playing low-level teams, but we know he can. 2.7 yards per carry so far, 3 sacks. Offensive line's been just fine. We expected this to be the 5th best offensive line in the Big Ten with 1 new starter. They've been 11th in pass blocking, 6th in run blocking. So living up to expectations at this point. The skill players are also vastly upgraded compared to last year. Still have Katron Allen, still have Nick Singleton, but Trevor Pena from Syracuse, Kyron Hudson from USC, and Devontae Ross from Troy, just vastly better at wide receiver. And tight end still okay too with Luke Reynolds. No, he's not Tyler Warren, but he is still pretty good tight end. And Dinkins is there. It's a good group. So they're facing Oregon's defense. This unit, so far, they've played 2 offenses outside the top 100. I mean, I think Northwestern probably should be there too, but they come in 54th in efficiency. So my whole point is they have not faced a good schedule of offenses. Northwestern did have 4.8 yards per carry, but a lot of that just coming in garbage time. The Oregon defense has been elite. They were expected to be top 4 in the Big Ten. Their biggest weakness on paper was that defensive tackle room after they lose multiple players to the NFL, but they still have elite recruits everywhere, and they paper over that with like Bear Alexander, who's playing in a rotation, the USC transfer, sort of flamed out as a high recruit. But Oregon's defense has been just fine. On paper, we had them pretty close with Penn State, just slightly ahead. So while this is very tough, with this particular game, you have to evaluate the nonsense schedules versus the returning production and what we've seen so far. Returning production certainly favors Penn State across the board, but that's not always a good thing. Aller has been up and down, especially in games like this. Dante Moore's the flashy 5-star with no experience who's now slaughtered a bunch of really weak competition. When you go and look at this game from a betting perspective, some of the intangible stuff is really important. Penn State at home, apparently the whiteout game, very tough road start for Dante Moore, and a ton of new starters across the board. It's not just Dante Moore. Your offensive line is new starters. You have a 5-star freshman as your top pass catcher. Defense is full of transfers as well. We lean Penn State minus the 3, show some value on this. I don't have a good feel where this line is going to move through the week. I think there's maybe a chance it gets to minus 2.5. I don't feel confident in saying that. But, if it goes to 3.5, I'm not super excited to run this to the window anyway. That probably would just mean I stay away at this point. But we'll wait on Penn State. Might end up on the card. Otherwise, probably just going to be a game I gather more information on and enjoy. It's going to be a great game. Back to the SEC. Auburn takes on Texas A&M. This game has a 6.5-point spread. The total is 53.5. Texas A&M, the favorite, of course, the home team. So far, we've actually seen good games from both teams. Auburn, they beat Baylor in a crazy shootout, 38-24, 98% post-game win expectancy for them. Crushed Baylor on the ground. Then they beat Ball State and South Alabama, a couple of blowouts. And last week's fiasco against Oklahoma, they lose by a touchdown. You guys have probably all heard it from the talking heads of the media at this point. The illegal Oklahoma touchdown, the fumble 6 that was taken off the board, the pass interferences. You get the deal. Auburn had a chance to win that game that was taken out of their hands because of the structure of officiating right now. We'll leave that for the people that don't actually analyze games. They got nothing else to talk about. We want to look forward. So anyway, on the A&M side, they beat UTSA, Utah State. Not always pretty. They allowed 20 points in both of those games before winning an absolute shootout against Notre Dame by 1 point. They still had a 66% post-game win expectancy there, 1 yards per play. It was a tight game, and Notre Dame's a good team. A&M was the rightful victor, and now they're coming off a bye. So injuries in this game, there actually aren't too many. Auburn's Jay Crawford at defensive back and Texas A&M's Bryce Anderson at defensive back. So it's a pretty clean bill of health for both teams so far. We'll start with Auburn's offense. The main problem for them this year has been Jackson Arnold. For all the ups, you get the downs. 68% completion, 7.1 yards per attempt, 3 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays. Very mobile. We know this. 3.3 yards per carry. Why is it so low? He's taken 17 sacks. The pressure rate is 24%, but his time to throw is nearly 3 seconds, which is very high. His pressure to sack ratio is 52%. This is one of the highest rates in the country. He had 11 sacks taken against Oklahoma. And this was properly diagnosed by the coaching staff. You watched their press conference from Monday. He just came out and said, blame Jackson Arnold for about 50% of the sacks in the offensive line. It is definitely exactly that. And that's the case with the offensive line. This was expected to be one of the better units in the SEC. They haven't quite managed that, and I think partially because of competition, but they're still pretty good. They virtually returned everyone. 44th in pass blocking, 35th in run blocking. And again, it's not just the offensive line allowing these sacks. It's Jackson Arnold holding the ball for way too long. And also, Oklahoma is a very good defensive line. As far as the skill players, they've been a little below average as a group. I think some of this is the run game. Jeremiah Cobb, a lot of his productions come against very low-level competition to 7.2 yards per carry. Damari Alston's really only been healthy against the good teams, 4.7 yards per carry. As he returns from injury, he should get better. On paper, this is a good offensive line and a good run game with good backs. The receivers, I think we need to see just a little more out of Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton. They've been good. We haven't seen a ton of Malcolm Simmons or Horatio Fields sort of filling in those gaps. But I also don't want to criticize them too much after Oklahoma defenders draped all over them. That could have been a much bigger game for both of them, especially Cam Coleman. So I really hesitate after going back and watching the tape on that. I don't think it's been quite so bad. These players have looked awesome just from the eye test. And we expected them to be awesome coming into the year. I would argue A&M's defense has not lived up to expectation, aside from just the points allowed to some of the opposing offenses they face. We mentioned over 20 points to Utah State and UTSA. Some of the optics have been bad. Like UTSA was ripping off 75-yard runs with Robert Henry. That's a little bit of a concern. CJ Carr for Notre Dame was at 9.2 yards per attempt. They've been strong most of the time, and then they have these lapses for a couple plays. Coming into the year, the expectation was a very good defense, not elite in any position group. They obviously had a ton of departures on the defensive line, NFL players across the board, really. Cassius Howell's the only one back, and he's been awesome. Their transfers were solid, though, like Onyedem, Hayes, seriously, all those transfers from power programs with production. We love that. Thought the secondary might be an issue, and it might be here with Anderson out. They're playing a lot of guys, Dalton Brooks and Des Ricks being the main concerns. But the matchup, is Auburn going to throw the ball over the top of you? They can in spots, but that's definitely been a weakness for them. They're not the most developed passing attack. It's not Arnold's strength. He doesn't have pocket presence, at least most of the time. The receivers are awesome, but it has been an issue getting them the ball at times. So it is kind of a good stylistic matchup for Texas A&M on defense, with their defensive line actually being pretty decent so far. When A&M has the ball, Marcel Reed has been up and down. He's missed a lot of throws. 58.5% completion percentage, 8.8 yards per attempt, 4 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays. We know he can run. He's only taken 1 sack, 5.7 yards per carry. Similar to Arnold, you're just getting the good with the bad. And the skill players are pretty good. Just need him to keep the ball out of harm's way. Starting with the O-line, we expected them to be kind of an average unit, above average unit. They returned a lot of starters. And honestly, with their recruiting and stuff, there was a ceiling for this to be an amazing unit. We just haven't seen it yet. 32nd in pass blocking, 48th in run blocking. I know I was touting this offensive line in the preseason. I thought it was an amazing unit. So they've not quite gotten to their ceiling yet. Remains to be seen if they will. Their run game also hasn't quite lived up to expectation. Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens just over 5 yards per carry. Their numbers should be better behind this offensive line. So that kind of as a whole unit has not lived up to their ceiling. I still think they can. But what's really surprised me and other people, we knew the pass catchers were going to be better. You have 4-star sophomore Mario Craver from Mississippi State, Casey Concepcion from NC State. But holy, Mario Craver has 443 yards. Concepcion, 227 yards, with Concepcion making impacts on special plays. Role players like Bethel Roman and Boosie coming in and filling in the gaps. The pass game has been better than expected, with the run game and the offensive line coming in a little below average. Just not what we expected. As for Auburn's defense, maybe this stresses them a little more with just the imbalanced results for Texas A&M. This Auburn defensive line is so good. And Keldrick Falk has been awesome. Kieran Crawford, even inside, like Bobby Jamison Travis in the league, blocked and have exceeded expectations. So you get Auburn with the second-ranked run defense. And it's been against good teams. They played Baylor. they were stuffing Sawyer Robertson and Bryson Washington. Sawyer Robertson did have 8.7 yards per attempt, which is the bigger problem, the pass defense. But you do a good job facing Baylor and Oklahoma in the run game, you should be able to at least play reasonably well against Texas A&M's run game that hasn't quite reached expectation. The secondary, now can Marcel Reed and these receivers catch the ball over the top? That's probably the best path to success. The secondary is unsettled. They've already benched Sylvester Smith. For Kensley Luador-Falston, Jaquez Robinson and Rayon Strader have been splitting time at one of the corner spots. Like, you can tell this is an issue and they know it. They're still searching around for the best 5 to put out there. And that's what's led to them ranking 111th in coverage. And Baylor throwing for nearly 9 yards per attempt. John Mateer up at 7.5. This is the biggest concern. And now the biggest question is, can Marcel Reed take advantage of this? With the defenses being strong on both sides, pacing is okay, not fantastic. Texas A&M has actually been playing much faster this year. I don't think that continues, but you never know. I think both defenses have edges in this game. Texas A&M's defense matches up very well against Auburn's offense, who at times struggles to throw. I think the same can be said about Texas A&M, whose on paper best asset is their run game. That's exactly where Auburn succeeds. If you force me to take anything, it would be an under 53.5. We're not quite there mathematically on the game. The model makes it right around that number, so not going to be a play, but that is one we will sit on and see where it goes throughout the week. LSU Ole Miss, another awesome SEC game. Both teams have been very good this year, and I would argue exceeding expectations, even with some of LSU's struggles. The line in the game is 1.5 in favor of Ole Miss. The total is 54.5, coming in a little low, in my opinion. And that is partially because LSU is playing very slow, 118th in pace. They're going to be faster than that. And we know what Ole Miss is going to do pace-wise. They're playing at the speed of light with Lane Kiffin. They've done that forever. So expecting pacing to be better than what we've seen so far, first and foremost. As far as resumes for these teams, LSU has looked awesome. Beat Clemson. That win hasn't quite aged as well as you would have liked. And it was only a 7-point win, 17-10. Louisiana Tech, they win 23-7. This is where some of the optics start looking bad for LSU. Actually, LSU played a very ugly first half, and the second half was awesome against Clemson. Whole game was ugly against Louisiana Tech. Whole game was ugly against Florida, too. They win 20-10 with a pick 6. They only scored 3 points offensively off 5 DJ Lagway turnovers. Again, not counting the pick 6. Want to know what their offense did off the turnovers. And then they beat Southeast Louisiana by slaughtering. That is what it is. Injuries for LSU. Gabriel Relaford, Caden Durham. Relaford's off the edge. Durham's running back. You notice Brian Kelly conveniently mentions an injury for Garrett Nussmeier that's not on the injury report as soon as he gets asked about offensive struggles. So who knows if Nussmeier's actually hurt or if Kelly's making excuses. I think the latter is probably more likely. On the Ole Miss side, they beat Georgia State. Not even close. Beat Kentucky by 7, beat Arkansas by 6, and then they crushed Tulane. None of the wins are actually that impressive. I would argue more on that in a little bit. So I think there's holes to be poked with Ole Miss as well. They are very healthy coming into this game. And the only major injury, I guess, is Austin Simmons, whose injury has actually helped them. Let's start with LSU's offense and Garrett Nussmeier and this potential injury that Kelly likes to mention. Nussmeier's been awesome. I would argue most of the problems are not him. 68.5% completion percentage, 7 yards per attempt, 11 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays. That's just kind of his game. He has that gunslinger mentality. The big-time throws vastly outnumber the turnover-worthy plays, but if you're an LSU fan, you're just going to have the occasional moment where you want to pull your hair out on a Garrett Nussmeier interception. It just is what it is. He is not mobile, though. He's taken 6 sacks on a 20% pressure rate. That O-line has been a problem at times. And it was expected to be a huge issue coming into the play this season. Now, they haven't done themselves many favors. You got offensive linemen getting targetings and stuff. DJ Chester. It's not the best unit. They're reliant on some younger recruiting, and it hasn't come together yet. They're 129th in run blocking, 54th in pass blocking. This is going to be an issue for them for a while now. I would argue the biggest concern for Nussmeier is why are these pass catchers organized the way they are? They have a 9% drop rate, which definitely doesn't help Nussmeier's numbers. Guys like Chris Hilton continue to get playing time. Like, I just can't. People love to talk about Chris Hilton. The guy's done nothing in his entire career. I've never seen a guy get so many chances after so many failures, a lot of them injury related, but still. Can we just get some younger players on the field? Like, give me more Barian Brown snaps, more Aaron Anderson snaps. Those are your two leading receivers. We don't need this 5 or 6 receiver rotation. It just doesn't make any sense. And the run game's a complete mess again. This is largely offensive line driven. And now Caden Durham's banged up. So we're going to maybe see more Harlem Berry. Who knows? Hope Durham's healthy for this game. And we will probably get back Trey Green, which that should help the pass catchers a ton. Just a dynamic 6'7" tight end who's so athletic he can actually play for the basketball team. All this to say, I don't think the LSU offense has quite reached their potential. There are some things they can do, hopefully on the offensive line to hide their issues, but maybe just reorganizing, reconfiguring this pass game to get some of the waste off the field. As for Mississippi's defense, LSU should be able to take advantage of this. The defense was expected to be much weaker last year. Ole Miss is not the best recruiting team, so they kind of have to work in cycles. And this year it appears to be down after they lose 8 starters. They've been weaker than expected too. The D-line was supposed to be the strength with guys like Suntarine Perkins and Cam Franklin off the edge, Xavier Harris inside. And those guys have been okay in run defense. The real problem has been the pass rush has completely evaporated. They're 118th in pass rush. This is like Suntarine Perkins' game. What's going on? And they've really only faced one competent signal caller so far, I would argue. Taylor Green. So I don't really have the answer. The secondary was expected to be the major concern. Out of good quarterbacks they faced, Taylor Green got them for 8.7 yards per attempt. Arkansas was at 6.0 yards per carry on this defense. Tulane's a one-dimensional offense. Jake Retzlaff really has problems throwing. They were still at 4.6 yards per carry. Kentucky was at 4.6 yards per carry. Georgia State was at 5.5 yards per carry. This defense is problems. So LSU, as good as they are on offense, they should move the ball. Meanwhile, Trinidad Chambliss, D2 champion with Ferris State, comes in, replaces Austin Simmons. And man, has this looked good. Has it been against good teams? No. Especially has not been good against good defenses. But 11.6 yards per attempt, 5 big-time throws, no turnover-worthy plays, 195 rushing yards, 5.4 yards per carry, only 2 sacks taken. Has he exceeded expectations? I think the answer is definitively yes. The skill position groups, the offensive line, a little up and down, especially the O-line. The expectation for this unit was a major step back, and they're 92nd in pass blocking, 105th in run blocking. I would argue that's about where we expected them. Receivers, running backs, expected a slight step back here as well. Transfers just not quite as good as last year. But Harrison Wallace, man, has he been good. 343 yards for him. Deuce Alexander's at 249. Daquan Wright at 213. Again, the defenses that they faced have been weak. LSU's defense is much better. So we have this offense that's looked awesome, but relatively untested against LSU's defense, which has shown massive improvements. And the only hole I really would poke is that Clemson's offense and Florida's offense have both been much worse than we've expected. Every one of these offenses is outside the top 60. But I still don't want to take anything away. Like Cade Klubnik and DJ Lagway are elite players, some of the best in the country, at least recruiting-wise. They're just, it's a better data point than the Louisiana Tech one is what I'm trying to say. And they have answered the bell against all of them. So I think the biggest concern with this team coming into the year was probably their secondary. It's full of transfers, but I mean, Mansour Delane, AJ Halsey, Tamarcus Cooley have all been awesome. They've answered every one of the questions. So I think that hole that you could have poked is gone. The defensive line was also full of a lot of transfers, like Patrick Payton and guys coming in. That's been awesome. Even questions like Harold Perkins have been answered. He's looked awesome too. So toughest test that Ole Miss is faced by a mile with this LSU defense coming to town. The pacing in this game should be pretty good. We mentioned that at the top. I want to highlight that in terms of an over. I think LSU's offense right away has success against this makeshift Ole Miss defense, so they should do their part. And then Ole Miss, it is their toughest test yet, but I think there are a lot of potential problems when defending a Trinidad Chambliss dual threat offense. So as long as Ole Miss does their part, I like the over in this game. I am interested in an LSU side. Missed the best number. This is already 1.5. When it was sitting at 2.5, was going to see if it tested 3. It did not. In fact, it went the other way. So we'll debate an LSU side. That's the side I definitely prefer in the spot. They're just more tested than Ole Miss right now. But over will be the best bet for us in the game at 54.5. Going to the Big Ten. USC takes on Illinois. 7-point spread in favor of the Trojans. A road trip for them. And the total in the game is 59.5. So it's a weird spot for USC. I'm going to check the time of this game. It's also, I thought this was the case. It's an 11 a.m. game, local. So USC is playing at a 9 o'clock a.m. That's their body clock when this is because of travel. So generally you don't see a lot of these spots in college. This is one of them. So kind of a weird spot there. As far as pacing in this game, it's pretty slow. USC has played a lot of cupcakes, so they will probably speed up. Illinois is around average in pace, a little below average. We've seen USC beat Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, and Michigan State. The Purdue and Michigan States were a little closer than expected. 33-17 over Purdue. Purdue had they threw a pick 6, so that kind of is what it is. They moved the ball well. Michigan State scored 31 points, but a lot of this came in garbage time. Like they scored on the final drive of the game where there was no chance of them winning. So I honestly think USC has played a little better than the box scores indicate. Illinois, I don't think that's the case. They beat Western Illinois. Then they beat Duke, where they should not have won, arguably. Duke had 5 turnovers. You listen to the Cincinnati press conference after the game. I don't know what Brett Bielema did to this guy, but 2 things he said. They asked him something about the offensive line, or did you know you were going to have success? And he's like, yes, turn on the Duke tape. Duke was moving the ball. They beat themselves with turnovers. I agree with that, and I bet Duke and lost that bet. And then Cincinnati also said, they asked him about Iowa or something. He's like, yeah, we have a much tougher opponent than last week. Cincinnati's just absolute wagon. Anyway, after the Duke game, they beat Western Michigan, a MAC team, and then they get slaughtered by Indiana. And an injury-riddled game for them, but we'll talk about the secondary. Brett Bielema loves to make excuses, and he said they were down 6 of their top 7 defensive backs. Not for the whole game, you weren't. Guys like Matthew Bailey played like 60 snaps, you absolute moron, Brett Bielema. Anyway, for injuries in this game, Jacoby Lane, he missed their last game. It seemed precautionary. He warmed up. And Elijah Page, their start offensive tackle for USC, got injured in the game. He's the biggest one to watch. For Illinois, Caleb Patterson, Xavier Scott, and Matthew Bailey, those defensive backs, all got injured to varying degrees. More on that later. Aiden Lawfrey at running back should be returning here. And Hank Beatty at wide receiver was in and out of the game. He just got banged up. So, USC's offense looked awesome, have not played very good opponents. I would argue Purdue and Michigan State are still bottom half Big Ten teams. It's still better than, like Penn State's schedule. So, Maeva, their quarterback, he's looked very good, 71% completion, 12.7 yards per attempt, 5 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays. I would like him to cut that down. They just don't need him to be a hero with these pass catchers. They're so good. Maeva is mobile, 3.7 yards per carry. But again, Waymon Jordan, the JUCO transfer running back, has lived up to expectations, 7.8 yards per carry. Mekhi Lemon has 438 yards. Jacoby Lane, who missed last game, has 239. Lake McCree's been awesome at tight end. This is the best skill position group Illinois has faced by far this year. USC is 3 or 4 NFL players in this offense among skill players. The O-line is the biggest concern for me. They were not expected to be good coming into the season. They faced 3 defensive lines outside the top 115 in pass rush, and then Purdue is 70th, and now Elijah Page is hurt. Can Illinois exploit this? They're 13th in pass rush. So that needs to be noted. But the level of competition is not great. Even with this pass rush, they have still allowed 9.5 yards per attempt to Darian Mensah, 11.6 yards per attempt to Fernando Mendoza. The defensive line allowed 6.4 yards per carry to Indiana. We thought the secondary was going to be the strength of Illinois with a major weakness on the defensive line, which I think has come to fruition. But now the secondary injuries have kind of allowed the defense to completely implode. But we do expect some of these players to return. Again, Matthew Bailey played most of the game. Xavier Scott and Caleb Patterson are a little bigger questions to me. And then some of the secondary players that had to play that got banged up, like Remitich, the guy got like the wind knocked out of him. Bielema, like, shut up, man. Like, your secondary wasn't you were down 6 secondary players for that entire game. It's not like you came in playing walk-ons, you absolute buffoon. Anyway, they're still pretty banged up in the secondary. If they have, I would argue, any of those guys miss time, it's going to be a field day for USC. Kind of the thesis for Illinois coming into the year with the secondary being a strength is that they had five good returning starters. They don't have any depth. This is not a good recruiting team. This isn't Bama. You have like really low-level players behind these guys. So it's definitely a concern if even one of them is out. On the Illinois side, offensively, Luke Altmaier has played well. He just hasn't really gotten any favors from his skill position group or his offensive line. He has a 68% completion percentage, 8.5 yards per attempt, 3 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. The problem with him is he's taken 15 sacks. That's on a 33% pressure rate. His pressure to sack ratio is high at 36.5%. So this is by no means just an offensive line problem. He's held the ball for a long time too. But I mean, people who look beyond just returning starters in the offensive line knew this unit was going to be a problem. Their players are just so low level. Like Melvin Priestley is a decent year last year. Turns out like FCS transfers don't translate to the Big Ten all that well. They're 109th in pass blocking, 37th in run blocking. The tackles have been bad. They're 2 really low-level tackles. So, I mean, like, what did you expect playing these kind of guys? You ran hotter than the sun to win 9 games last year. It just kind of is what it is. And then the skill players, like I like their run game. Caden Fagan, 4.4 yards per carry. I thought it'd be better, honestly, but he's been solid. Lawfrey's been great when healthy. He should be back here. But it's like your receivers, I mean, it's cute to play guys like Hank Beatty and Colin Dixon, but they're just not very good. I'm sorry. You lost Pat Bryant. You lose Zachary Franklin. Like Beatty having 302 yards is great. Now he's banged up. Where do you turn? You don't have any good players in this group. No good recruits, no good transfers. Hudson Clement, your best transfer. He's barely playing. Like there just isn't any playmakers for Altmaier to throw the ball to. It is what it is. So now you're playing USC's defense. Coming into the year, we expected them to be much better in year 2 under D'Anton Lynn. They've just added a lot of talent. So on top of guys like Kamari Ramsey in the secondary, you get Bishop Fitzgerald in from NC State. He's been awesome. DeCarlos Nicholson's been good. The D-line's actually shown improvement too. Cameron Felton, Anthony Lucas, Jair Abasiri. And that's the thing. You can make vast improvements when you're USC and you go through the 2-deep and you see 4-star, 4-star, 5-star. So players coming out of nowhere like Abasiri on the defensive line, defensive tackle, you're like, where did this guy come from? Oh, he's a top 200 recruit. Shocking players like that develop year 1 to year 2 and make seismic jumps, whereas players like Melvin Priestley from Grambling take a step back. Unbelievable stuff to fathom. Anyway, the defense has been very good. It has shown cracks. Aiden Charles did get them for 9.8 yards per attempt, but again, he had a great game in garbage time. Purdue's Ryan Brown, 7.8 yards per attempt. They did a good job against Georgia Southern, and right now they're second in pass coverage efficiency with a top 40 defensive line. It's been a much better defense for USC than expected. All this to say, enough of my tilting about Illinois and the media and how they cover them. We still make USC a little bit outside the 7. I want to see where it goes because honestly, I think this is probably going to be Illinois taking money on, a little buyback, especially at home with the clock stuff. Like 9 a.m. body clock is not ideal for USC. So I want to see where this goes. I could see taking a USC position later in the week at like a 6 or 6.5, something like that. I've been a seller of this Illinois team all off season. So I'm sorry, I'll stop victory lapping this. It's USC or pass for me right now. Enough of the nonsense. Indiana takes on Iowa. 7-point spread here. Another road touchdown favorite in Indiana. The total is 48.5. Basically, through the moon for an Iowa game compared to what we've seen previously. But Indiana so far, they beat Old Dominion, a somewhat scary game, 27-14. Essentially, it was so close. Indiana missed a couple plays in that game, like touchdowns that were bombs, drop passes. I believe it was Omar Cooper or EJ Williams. I can't remember which one. Had an 50-yard touchdown right in the breadbasket, over-the-shoulder catch just dropped. And then they actually did a great job defending Old Dominion for most of that game, outside of 2 or 3 Colton Joseph scrambles that end up going for like 75-yard touchdowns. So that's how you get a score closer than maybe it should have been. Since then, they blow out Kennesaw State, Indiana State, and top 10 Illinois. Meanwhile, Albany is a victory for Iowa. Rutgers was a good win for them. UMass was a blowout. Kind of just Iowa State is that lone blip on the radar for Iowa so far. And it was a rightful Iowa State win. Iowa has a 25% post-game win expectancy. They lose yards per play, 3.4 to 4.2. They threw an interception at their own 33, which is how Iowa State got one of their touchdowns. The rest of the game was a punt fest. So you can't be throwing interceptions at your own 33. Anyway, they've looked better. The Rutgers win was important. They outgained them yards per play. Some of it was a little fluky. You know, they have a kick return touchdown. They block a Rutgers field goal. And Rutgers threw an interception at their own 27, giving Iowa a touchdown. You don't ever want to give that Iowa offense opportunities in opponent territory. As far as the injuries go, for Indiana, pretty clean bill of health outside of Lee Beebe at running back. For Iowa, Xavier Williams is now hurt at running back. It's essentially one guy in, one guy out for that position. Addison Ostrenga's out at tight end, and Reese Vanderzee still not back from that ankle sprain. Let's start with Indiana's offense. They just crush an Illinois defense where a lot of guys respect them. Mendoza, 75% completion percentage, 9.7 yards per attempt, 3 big-time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play. He's only taking 3 sacks. And this is the biggest difference between like what we try to do and the public analysis that only looks at returning starters or departures. We had Indiana projected as the 3rd best offensive line coming into the year. So what changed? Yeah, they lost some starters, but they proactively bring in Pat Coogan. You bring in Khalil Benson. The players that you have who are stepping up in the program are pretty decent recruits. They're 3rd in pass blocking, 5th in run blocking. Illinois was 13th in pass rush coming into that game last week. They handled them. This is a good Indiana offensive line, and we knew this coming into the year. We also knew their skill players were very good too. We had this as the 2nd best receiving corps coming into the year, behind Ohio State, and there were arguments for it being right up there with Ohio State. The skill players, Kalen Black's at 7 yards per carry. Roman Hemby, he's at 5.3 yards per carry, an awesome pass catcher. Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper both dominating the receiving game. You have solid ancillary options at tight end and E.J. Williams. It's a very, very good Indiana offense. And now you look at Iowa's defense. They're 26th. That's good. It's a very good defense. It's just kind of below expectation because Iowa has set the standard for having a top 5 defense nationally every year. So what have they done? They have played good offenses. Iowa State is 30th overall in efficiency. They held back to 5 yards per attempt, largely because that defensive line for Iowa was crushing the Iowa State offensive line. But as always, Becht has a few hero plays and ends up with a win. They did a relatively good job against 8th and Kaliak-Manis. He still finished with 8.3 yards per attempt. Those receivers for Rutgers are no joke. So they did enough, is what I would say. Coming into the year, we expected Iowa to take a slight step back on defense, and it has been rough at times. That's secondary. Last year, the guys they were benching repeatedly, like Hall, they're having to play full-time roles this year. So that back 7 is still a problem. They lost both their linebackers. I think returns have been average. The real position of strength has been that defensive line. Ethan Herquette, Max Llewellyn, Aaron Graves, Jonah Pace have all been very good. So I'm very curious to see the duel, this Indiana offensive line versus this Iowa pass rush. I do believe this is the best pass rush Indiana will have faced to this point, which could put a challenge on Mendoza. He's been awesome because he hasn't been pressured. What does that look like? Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball with Iowa, I think you have to start with their offensive line. We had this as the best offensive line coming into the year. So yeah, we had this graded out. Iowa, number 1 offensive line, Indiana, number 3, excuse me. So for Iowa, we knew Jennings Dunker was a freak. They were replacing 2 starters, but this whole unit has been unbelievably good. They have not exactly faced a lot of good defenses. The best pass rush they faced is Rutgers at 94. So I go back to, did you exceed expectation or fall short? They've exceeded it. You still do have the caveat against really bad pass rushes. But that's how the offense starts. Does the offensive line play well, and then can you run the ball behind them? Honestly, Xavier Williams, Kamari Moulton, Jay-Z and Patterson, they've been pretty mid as running backs, but they have some of the most open running lanes of any team in the country. So that's important. You need to be able to run the ball with this running back room. Wish they still had like a Caleb Johnson still on the team. But so far, they've been okay. And then the pass game. So Gronowski, I wish they would use him more on design runs because him as a passer has left a lot to be desired. I don't know if it's nerves. It's not all his fault either. The skill players are horrible, but he has a 60% completion for 6.1 yards per attempt, 2 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays. He's taken 7 sacks on a 31% pressure rate. Probably some incongruence in your mind there. You're like, oh, this offensive line is so good. How's the pressure rate 31% nearly? It's almost entirely his fault. He's holding onto the ball for an eternity. He doesn't trust his pass catchers. I wouldn't either. 14% drop rate for them. It's just like this pass catching room is the absolute laughing stock of the Big Ten. I don't know how. It's Iowa. I get it. It's hard to get guys to come there. But how do you come into the season with this group? And Reese Vanderzee's hurt, so maybe that's part of it. But this pass catching room is an absolute joke. This is like something I would expect to see at Bowling Green. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough for Gronowski through the air specifically. They should use him on the ground because he is mobile, largely just because this receiving room is such a joke. Can Indiana stop it? I mean, you should probably just play 8 in the box every single play. We thought Indiana was going to be a top 5 defense coming into the year, even with 6 departing starters. And part of that is because Mikhail Kamara is back, stud. D'Angelo Ponce is back at corner, stud. The only player who's been below average is Aiden Fisher at linebacker. And now you're facing a one-dimensional Iowa offense. So we'll see. I think Indiana has some success here as well on defense. They have edges really across the board. The only position I think that is definitively an Iowa edge is offensive line. And then it's sort of like opposing defenses have an easier time with this big advantage because their pass game is so weak. Anyway, Indiana has a lot of advantages. The difference here between last week and this week, where Indiana closes as a touchdown favorite against Illinois, we have Iowa as a significantly better team than Illinois. Iowa is at home in this game. It's a very tough place to play. We actually make this right on the 7. I think you could potentially look at an under. Both defenses, I think, have some ability to come into this game and play well. Iowa's played shockingly fast. I would argue they slow. Indiana's been very slow. So under a 48.5 is interesting to me. But that is where we sit right now. One, we will wait and see what happens throughout the week. Ohio State, Washington, a sneaky game. Ohio State has to head out west after a bye. They're 8.5-point favorites. Washington taking money. The total is 52 points. So far, Ohio State beat Texas. Seems like an eternity ago. They win 14-7 in a really ugly game. 18% post-game win expectancy. They forced the only turnover, which is how they win. Since then, beat Grambling, beat Ohio, both blowouts, and then they had the bye. Washington has played nobody, which is very important for the injury front. They beat Colorado State 38-21. They beat UC Davis, and then they beat Washington State 59-24. They have a long injury report. I would argue, at least it seems to me, they've been holding guys out. The 2 major injuries, Rashid Williams, he's not a receiver. Tariq Al-Uqda got hurt at linebacker. I don't know. That was in game too, so this is not a situation where they held him out. But some of the players they have held out, Jacob Manu at linebacker, Logan Sagapolu, Zadrius Rainey-Sale, Takario Davis, Dyson McCutcheon, Javon Parker. They're all on defense. I don't know who returns. Ohio State is basically healthy across the board, and they're coming off a bye. So for Ohio State's offense, Julian Sayin has really turned it on since that Texas game where he threw for 126 yards. The one thing you can say about that is he didn't have any turnover-worthy plays. And drops were an issue. His box score maybe could have been better. But now he has a 79% completion, 11 yards per attempt, 3 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays, and 3 interceptions. Been hung out to dry a couple times. The skill position players are going to be better. The drop problems for Jeremiah Smith are not going to continue. Carnell Tate, Brandon Enos, it may be the best wide receiver trio in the nation. CJ Donaldson and James Peoples, more than okay at running back. And maybe Bo Jackson, their freshman, gets more work after he's dominated kind of the weaklings of their schedule. We'll see. By far, the biggest concern with the offense was the O-line. Expected slight regression here, especially at tackle. The interior is actually pretty experienced, but you move to Phillip Daniels from Minnesota. starting next to Austin Sierveld, who was an interior player last year. They're a good offensive line, just they're going to have questions against some of the better teams. We saw that against Texas especially. So can Washington stop them on defense? Probably not. They're very injured. Again, we're going to have to probably see who is actually a serious injury on the pregame report because I don't think they all are. But this unit's been below expectation even with the weaklings on their schedule. 118th in run defense, 64th in coverage. And they had defensive line concerns coming into the year, which still appear to be a problem. So I fully expect Ohio State to move the ball, even with the schedule we've seen from Washington completely wasting our time. They have not lived up to expectations with it. On the other side, Damon Williams has been awesome. He has not been tested like this, I would argue, in his career. 73.5% completion, 11.4 yards per attempt, no turnover-worthy plays. He is extremely mobile, 220 yards on the ground at 6.5 yards per carry. He has taken 6 sacks. The pressure rate has been 39%. Part of that his fault. Part of that, we didn't expect Washington to be very good. This was projected to be the third worst offensive line in the Big Ten heading into the season, and they haven't really been tested. Washington State is 60th in pass rush efficiency, but they face no one in the top 100 of run defenses. So it's still a relatively untested offensive line. Okay, Carver Willis came in from Kansas State. Landon Hatchett returned. Otherwise, very little experience. The one caveat I will say, they've recruited well. There's a lot of 4-stars on this offensive line. They're very young, but at least having the 4-stars gives you a ceiling that you could potentially access if you're able to develop them fast. So I don't feel great about ranking them where I did, but we still expect this to be an offensive line with problems, which is going to be a problem against Ohio State. This defense had them still top 10 coming into the season with all their losses. And they've exceeded expectations, in my opinion. They handled business against Texas. We knew Caleb Downs was going to be an absolute wagon, All-American, maybe top 5 NFL draft pick, but Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. Now in early mock drafts, I've seen a lot of them that have Reese and Styles as the top 2 LBs off the board. They've been awesome. Styles we know can cover too. Caden Curry and Caden McDonald have been elite on the defensive line. This is going to be a problem for Washington. So in this game, I'm close to betting Ohio State. I won't lie. This is against the model. We actually show some value on the Washington side. They've been bumped up in the model and across the board in the industry because of what they've done against Colorado State, UC Davis, and Washington State. I flat out don't buy it. This Ohio State team is vastly more talented. I think they have significant defensive advantages, especially over that Washington O-line. Offensively, I'm not sure how the defense stops Ohio State. Optics haven't been great, which is maybe another reason why Ohio State comes in as, Washington's taking money. But I don't know. We're going to debate Ohio State here. No reason to take it now. All the money's been pouring out in Washington. At like a 7, this would be an auto go. I'll debate this outside the 7. We may end up playing a Buckeyes position in this game. Arizona takes on Iowa State. We have a Big 12 clash here. So far, I guess, Arizona's been impressive. Both of these teams kind of have marquee wins against Kansas State, which isn't great. Otherwise, Arizona beat Hawaii, beat Weber State. Iowa State has more games. They played South Dakota. Iowa's a good win. Arkansas State. So it's been a little up and down for both teams, but I would argue above expectation for both. For injuries, Kedrick Reese-Connell for Arizona, Trey Smith on the edge, Traden Stukes at defensive back. Iowa State's coming off a bye, so they'll have extra time. Gabe Burkle missed their last game at tight end, and Jontez Williams was severely limited in his snap count at defensive back. I'm not sure what the deal is there. For Arizona's offense, a lot of their problems have been penalties. They have gotten themselves field goals where they should have scored touchdowns many times. Noah Fafita has been a roller coaster, 58% completion percentage, but 9 yards per attempt, 6 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. He's been rushing the ball more than ever. It's still only 1.3 yards per carry because he has taken 6 sacks, but man, we've seen him rush for a couple touchdowns now. The pressure rate is 31%, so that's part of the reason why the sacks have been there. And honestly, his passing stats would be better if his receivers hadn't dropped 13% of his passes. And that's part of it. The infrastructure with Arizona is not great. First of all, they're not really playing Luke Wysong and Chris Hudson, the 2 transfers we thought would immediately step in. Instead, Jevin Watley from Chattanooga has been the wide receiver 1. That's probably an issue moving forward. The run game's been very good. Mahdi's at 7.1 yards per carry. Quincy Craig and Reese Connell been good when healthy too. The O-line was expected to be a below-average unit, and they haven't really faced any good defensive lines. Like, Hawaii's okay for the G5, and Kansas State's atrocious. They did bring in some transfers like Ty Buchanan, Kaina DeCambra, and Tristan Bounds, which are better than most programs, but it's still not a strength. So we do think there are probably worse days ahead for Arizona from the skill position group, from the offensive line, which will affect Fafita being a small quarterback under pressure. That's not a good recipe. Can Iowa State be the team that generates this potential weakness or exploits it? Probably not. They're 83rd in total defense. The D-line's been horrible. They're like 95th in total defensive line. Their coverage has been okay at 58th. And who have they faced? Kansas State is 90th in offensive efficiency. Iowa's actually 10th. That's how good their offensive line has been, but they're just so inept passing the ball. Like 3.5 yards per attempt from Gajewski in that game was a mess. And then Arkansas State's 107th. They have bad defensive efficiency numbers, and they haven't played anyone good on offense. We thought the defensive line might be better, and they just have straight up failed. They have like one good player, Dominique Orange. And honestly, like the secondary, that's the best unit that they have. Is Jontez Williams hurt or something? Why did he play like 17 snaps? They need him. Him, Patton, and Neal are their best defenders overall. So, first of all, Arizona probably has some success running the ball in this game. And then if there's something with the secondary, maybe they can throw the ball too. As far as the Iowa State offense, we know how this goes. Their O-line is not very good. They have taken a step forward, but again, they were so bad last year, like 115th. They've now moved into like the 80s, which is better, but they've also faced 2 run defenses outside the top 80 and 2 pass rushes outside the top 100. These efficiency numbers are carried by Iowa. So that's how you get Iowa State offensive line a little better. The skill players are atrocious for this team. You're essentially working with tight ends. And I like Burkle. I like Brahmer. Tyler Moore's okay too. You just don't have any good receivers. Like Eskilsden, he's your top receiver. Your transfers, Sowell and Townsend have both failed. The run game is only a little above average. Hansen and Abu Sama, 4.8, 4.7 yards per carry. Basically the definition of mid. So because of the systemic issues with the offensive line, Beck's skill players don't have time. The receivers are bad. And that's how you get his stats would be so much better if he had anything better as they were last year. 65% completion, 8.6 yards per attempt, 6 Big Ten throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. He has taken 6 sacks. It's a miracle it's not more. His drop rate is 8.5% from his pass catchers. That makes sense. They're all pretty bad. So can Arizona stop this offense? We thought this Arizona team was going to be improved on defense, especially the defensive line, but still not fantastic. They have exceeded expectations so far with Genesis Smith, Dalton Johnson, and Gavin Hunter playing well in the secondary. And there is a ceiling for more if Trey Smith can get back on the edge. They still have not played a lot of good teams. Kansas State's 90th in offensive efficiency and Hawaii's 134th. So there's still questions is the answer. Overall, we wanted to take an over in this game at 49.5. We hit 49. Pacing should be pretty good. Arizona 64th. Iowa State is 82nd. We have major concerns with both defenses. I think Arizona in particular is a little fraudulent with that schedule, and Iowa State has already shown their cracks. Offensively, Becht is going to put the ball into the end zone against this defense. And Fafita, maybe it'll be a little more challenging, but as long as he can do his part, over 49.5 does not match up with what we have projected pace and offensive efficiency. Notre Dame, Arkansas, really weird game here. Notre Dame hits the road to Fayetteville. They are a 5-point favorite. The total is 64.5, and that's with pace being bad. Notre Dame's 102nd. Arkansas is only 50th. That's because the defenses have really struggled for both of these teams. Notre Dame's had a really tough going, probably the hardest schedule in the country to this point. They lose to Miami with a 49% post-game win expectancy. They lose to A&M with a 34% post-game win expectancy. And from there, they have a win over Purdue after a crazy rain delay. Basically, 56-30. It's exactly what you kind of expected. They were very injured on defense. More on that in a second. So Purdue did move the ball. I would argue that's kind of what you should have expected given their secondary Notre Dame was putting on the field. For Arkansas, they beat Alabama A&M. They beat Arkansas State. They lose to Ole Miss. They missed a couple field goals in that game, but still only had a 29% post-game win expectancy. Then they just give the ball away to Memphis late in the game. They lose with an 82% post-game win expectancy. The whole game, there was no defense in it at all. Arkansas had 3 turnovers. Memphis had 2. Memphis had that fumble recovery at the end of the game when Arkansas was going in to score, literally decided the game. As far as injuries go, Notre Dame very injured in the secondary. Leonard Moore, Devontae Smith, Carson Hobbs, all of them have been out or playing limited roles. Also didn't have their kicker, Noah Burnett. For Arkansas, Connie Walker's been hurt. He got stretchered off 2 weeks ago at defensive back. Starting with Notre Dame, CJ Carr, 63.5% completion percentage, 9.6 yards per attempt, 4 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays. Has taken 3 sacks. The pressure rate is 29.5%. The O-line has really struggled. They were expected to take a slight step back due to their departures, and then Charles Jagasaw crashes ATV, removing another starter. So you have Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp playing tackle. They have both really struggled. Now, Miami's the top 3 defensive line. Texas A&M is around the top 40, 30 defensive line. They allowed 14 pressures to Miami, 11 to Texas A&M, only 5 to Purdue. Arkansas is definitely somewhere in between the elite SEC team and Miami, and then Arkansas is a little better probably than Purdue. So better days are ahead just because of schedule, but this Notre Dame offensive line is not what we saw last year, and that's affected the run game. Honestly, Jeremiah Love's been outplayed by Jadarian Price. 5.5 yards per carry to 6.9, at least in the run game. Love is still an excellent pass catcher. The pass catchers themselves are improved with Fields coming in from Virginia. Raridon's been a fine replacement at tight end. Faison is 155 yards, so that's good. Just the whole offense. I think it's been elevated by Carr, but there's still some systemic issues, and not being able to run the ball like they did last year has been a problem. But can Arkansas stop them? I would argue probably not. We thought this was going to be a bottom 4 defense coming into the season, at least among SEC teams. On paper, they didn't really have a clear strength or a weakness, which is the problem. You can kind of just beat this team everywhere. There's a couple good players like Quincy Rhodes on the edge, Julian Neal at corner, Cameron Ball at defensive tackle. But with 5 returning starters, there are definitely weaknesses. And it's just not a talented enough team to stand up in this conference, which Notre Dame is on par with a lot of SEC teams. You allow 11.9 yards per attempt to Trinidad Chambliss, 7.1 yards per carry to Memphis. Notre Dame should have offensive success in this game. Meanwhile, I wish Taylon Green was on a different team. He just doesn't have a great skill position group around him, doesn't have a good offensive line around him. He's been awesome. 7 turnover-worthy plays is the real problem, but he kind of needs to do that because his team is so bad. Bobby Petrino has been a great offensive asset for him as well. And with Taylon Green, you're going to take the good with the bad. We mentioned the bad. The good, 64% completion, 5 big-time throws. He leads the team in rushing. He's awesome. The skill players have been pretty good too. I would argue above expectation. Honestly, the real argument is probably just like Petrino maximizing these guys. Mike Washington is 7.2 yards per carry. He's awesome when he's not fumbling games away. Their transfers are really low level at pass catcher. Like Omega Blake comes from the G5. Rohan Jones, I believe he's from Montana or Montana State, I forget, at tight end. And he's barely played. He had like 19 snaps last game. He's second on the team in receiving. Like, this is a bad group of skill position players that Taylon Green is maximizing and Bobby Petrino is maximizing. The offensive line was expected to be decent, even with the players they lost, and they lost a lot. They did add some quality transfers like Corey Robinson and Caden Kittler. So far, they've been above average. And we thought they'd be around decent to above average, so this is a good data point for them. They still haven't really faced a good defensive line. Memphis is 68th and Ole Miss is 118th. So we'll see moving forward. Notre Dame's defense has been a major issue, a lot of it because of injuries. Starting with the defensive line, this is a healthy unit, but Gabriel Rubio, Donovan Heinisch are replacing 2 departures. It hasn't been great. The secondary has been all over the place. So now it looks like they're going to bench one of their safeties, and Carson Hobbs, their nickel's already been kind of benched. Christian Gray's been playing bad. At what point does he get benched? My main concern here is, okay, you lost some players to the NFL. You also lost a lot of your depth pieces to transfer, players like Kennedy Urlacher. They're on different teams. So now when you have a starter coming in and underachieving, suddenly you're turning to really inexperienced depth. Now, these players are still highly recruited, but we're talking freshmen. So it's a concern for Notre Dame. They allowed 9.7 yards per attempt to Marcel Reed, 7.8 to Ryan Brown. Can Taylon Green throw the ball over the top? I think so. You're just going to have to take the good with the bad. We actually lean Arkansas plus a 5 still. It opened at plus 6. I won't lie to you. I just don't have the heart to bet Sam Pittman, Arkansas, Taylor Green at this point. Can't get there. Even with all the value we show, it's going to be a pass. I don't know if you could make a number that would have me bet this game. It'd probably need to be like 14, which it's never going to get. So with the coaching staff being a huge problem, at least Pittman will pass on this game and wait and see where it goes. Maybe just be a game we watch. I believe there's 2 left. I'm going long. I apologize. Tennessee versus Mississippi State. Tennessee is a 7.5-point road favorite, 62 total. One of the better teams in the SEC, one of the surprises. I did not think Tennessee was going to be very good. They have shoved it down my throat, beating Syracuse. That was expected. Losing to Georgia in a game they should have won, 76% post-game win expectancy. And then they beat UAB. So it's kind of been just a little more than we expected with Tennessee so far. Mississippi State knew they were going to be better. Still think they're towards the bottom of the SEC, but they are no longer the cupcake they were last year. Beat Southern Miss, beat Arizona State. We were on them in that game. Beat Alcorn State and beat Northern Illinois. They have taken care of exactly what they should and outperformed expectation. For Tennessee, they've been really hurt, and some of these guys will probably be back. The main concerns are Jermod McCoy and Ricky Gibson in the secondary. They've been holding out Jackson Moy, David Hobbs, and David Sanders, 2 on the D-line, 1 on the O-line. I expect them all to return, just not sure. For Mississippi State, DB Jerron Manning, an Old Dominion transfer, got hurt last week. Will Whitson is out for the year on the edge. Let's start with Tennessee. I thought they were taking a step back at quarterback from Iamaleava to Joey Aguilar. I'm starting to question it a little more. Tennessee has not played a great slate of opposing defenses outside of Georgia, and Aguilar is throwing up absolute prayers with Brazel mossing guys. So I'm still not sure if this is all on him. With that said, he also hasn't always been done favors. He has 3 interceptions and only 1 turnover-worthy play. So you get the point there. His pass catchers have dropped 8% of his passes. This could look better for Aguilar. So I think there is a little bit of push and pull with him. 66% completion, 9.6 yards per attempt. The skill players, a little up and down. Star Thomas, Deshaun Bishop have been pretty good in the run game. Brazel has been awesome. Apparently he's Randy Moss, 426 yards. Braylon Staley and Matthews have been pretty good outside of the occasional blip on the radar for them. All this was expected to a point. The O-line was expected to be a weaker unit in the SEC. They only had 1 starter back. He was a bad starter too in Lance Hurd. They played pretty good against Georgia. Georgia is 124th in pass rush efficiency right now and 11th in run defense, so a little up and down. That's the only good D-line they faced, but they did handle business. And I probably should have been a little higher on them with Sam Pendleton coming in, Wendell Moe coming in from power programs. They haven't had their 5-star freshman David Sanders yet. So maybe this O-line is just maybe a lot better than I thought. I thought they were going to come in and be a weaker unit. That has not been the case. Can Mississippi State stop them? Probably not. Mississippi State is 38th in total defense. They haven't faced an offense in the top 70 yet. Tennessee certainly is that. So they've looked awesome, but it's come against bad competition. They've given up some yardage on the ground to Northern Illinois. Arizona State was at 4.9 yards per carry. And the defense, kind of like the offense, was expected to vastly improve. But we're talking jumps from the 120s here. If we even got to average, this was going to be awesome, which is kind of where we expect them to be. They're 58th in run defense, 102nd in pass rush. A lot of it is transfer driven. The pass rush has been a problem. Like outside of Malik Silla, he's been the only one to get pressure. Either way, the defense has improved. It's not going to be like Tennessee just getting whatever they want, most likely in this game. Meanwhile, Blake Shapen is back at quarterback for Mississippi State. 67% completion, 8.8 yards per attempt. He has 5 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. Some rushing yards, but the pressure rate's at 30%. Rushing's not his major skill. The offensive line, we thought this was going to be the worst offensive line in the SEC. Again, it's like the theme with Mississippi State is we were taking jumps from 130th and hopefully getting to around 70th in the country. 70th in the country is probably worse than every other team, but it's still above average. Not a unit you're going to go out and worry about getting absolutely run over. They also got Albert Reese back from injury in their last game. He is a significant improvement over Jimothy Lewis, so maybe the O-line is a little better. Basically, the story with them is they're good, not great at most position groups. Same thing at skill players. Devon Booth, Fluff, Bothwell have been okay. pass catchers are cast-offs, elite recruits from other SEC teams, Brennan Thompson, Anthony Evans, better than last year, but altogether, still an average unit. Tennessee's defense, I thought this was going to be a problem, especially with Gibson, especially with McCoy hurt. They've actually had pretty decent secondary play out of Colton Hood and Jalen McMurray. I still think opposing offenses that are a little more competent, like Georgia's, are going to take advantage of this weakness. But regardless, this defense is impressed. Thought the D-line was going to be formidable, even with losing Pierce. They are. Josephs has been awesome. Tyree West, Jordan Ross, Dominic Bailey, Bryson Eason. They've also held out some of their defenders. We mentioned the defensive linemen they haven't played. This is going to be a good D-line. So can Mississippi State protect against them? I think they'll do a decent job, but honestly, like Tennessee should get theirs on both sides of the ball throughout this game. That's the side we lean to, but more than anything else, I think a total is pretty good in this game. We're dealing with two top 20 paces. Levy versus Heupel. This game is going to have all the pace in the world. We think both offenses can have some success. Aguilar and these pass catchers, Brazil especially against Mississippi State's defense. And I personally still think Tennessee has some secondary questions that Mississippi State can hopefully at least do their part to get this over. So I think it might come down. We're going to wait and see where it goes. But right now it's Tennessee, it's the over, or it's a pass. Last game, don't sleep on Cincinnati, Kansas. This is one of the sneaky elite games of the day. Kansas is a 5.5-point favorite. The total is 55.5. We bet Cincinnati. Feel terrified. First and foremost, their coaching staff definitely does not have an edge over Kansas with Leipold. The Satterfield, they love to lose games they shouldn't. They already did it once this year against Nebraska with a 63% post-game win expectancy. Then they play Bowling Green and Northwestern State, coming off a bye this week. Kansas, meanwhile, has looked very good. They beat Fresno. They beat Wagner. Lose to Missouri. Semi-respectable loss. They did score one of their touchdowns on a fumble 6 that Missouri allowed them. And they also had a turnover on down. So it kind of wasn't – the box score, I think, was friendly to them. And then they absolutely slaughter West Virginia last week. I don't want to read too much into that. For injuries, with Cincinnati coming off the bye, you hope they get back Dante Corleone and Jack Dingle on defense. Kansas did lose Daniel Highshaw. It looked precautionary. And LaShawn Williams is back now, so it's not the biggest loss, if not. Let's start with Sorsby and Cincinnati's offense. Sorsby has quietly been a very good quarterback for this team. 70% completion, 10.3 yards per attempt, 6 big-time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play. He leads the team in rushing with 8 yards per carry. Has not taken a sack this year. It's going to get harder. Nebraska was a formidable opponent. Kansas, I think, is around that area. But Cincinnati has a good offensive line. We expected them to be pretty good coming into the year, even with like Joe Cotton playing from South Dakota. They have not played a great run defense yet. Nebraska's 79th in run defense, 86th in pass rushing. So it looks like Cincinnati might be a little better than expected, even with that data point. The run game should be pretty good. Evan Pryor and Tawi Walker, both over 5.9 yards per carry. I have real questions with the receivers, just like Jeff Caldwell, Caleb Goody, and Cyrus Allen are low-level guys. Somehow they've kind of maximized them. So credit to Sorsby. They do have a good tight end in Joe Royer. Kansas's defense, I think, is then above expectation. They have played some good offenses. Fresno State's 42nd, Missouri's 4th. The only problem is they allowed 8.6 yards per attempt to both Pribula and 5.7 yards per carry. So the defense only had 2 starters back. They got a few rotational D linemen. They rotated like D tackle a lot. Tommy Dunn and DJ Withers are kind of experienced. And linebackers been very banged up. Surprised they've been successful there. The secondary has honestly surprised too. Lyric Rawls, Jalen Todd have been better than expected. I still don't trust them just yet, so I think Cincinnati can move the ball. There were just a lot of moving parts for this team coming into the year. Meanwhile, Jalen Daniels, been very good, 67% completion, 8.3 yards per attempt, 5 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays, 6.1 yards per carry. He's taken 3 sacks, which is pretty good because the pressure rate's 35%. Wide receivers have also dropped 11% of his passes, and that's going to be the thing. Hopefully they can win through the run game with Williams and Highshaw when they're healthy because they lost all their pass catchers. Emmanuel Henderson's an Alabama transfer. That's good. But Cam Pickett, Levi Wentz, it's a very low-level group of pass catchers outside of Henderson. And the O-line we thought was going to be above average. They brought back 2 studs in Foster and Baines. They've been rotating players outside of that. Clements and Herring appear to have grown nicely within the system, and Enrique Cruz fills a little bit of the gap. But Missouri's defensive line gave them trouble. They had 15 pressures in that game. That's going to happen when you play better teams. So can Cincinnati do that? I think they've sort of underachieved on the defensive line with Corleone being injured. He should be back. But the pass rush has been brutal. They're 120th. Run defense has been awesome. A lot of that Corleone, a lot of that the linebackers, Jake Golday, Jonathan Thompson, Jack Dingle have been excellent. So can we get a little bit more pass rush juice against Kansas? I'm not sure. I hope the answer is yes. Otherwise, the secondaries look decent so far. They've rotated guys. Players like Daniel James are still questionable, but it's been okay. They held Rayola to 5.8 yards per attempt. Drew Pine was at 7.4. But overall, Cincinnati's defenses look pretty good. This game is a home game for Kansas, so it's a tricky road spot for Cincinnati, but it's just too many points. We took Cincinnati plus the 6 overall in this contest, which is where we will finish. So to recap quickly, so far the bets for the elite games we have in the actual numbers we played were over 49 in the Arizona-Iowa State game. We played over 54.5 in LSU Ole Miss. Took Alabama plus 3.5 and Cincinnati plus a 6. Quick housekeeping. We will have the greasy games on Friday. We'll do the weekday games and standalones as well. If you want requests, feel free to leave those in the comments. We did not do the recap show this week, to be honest with you. It was just poorly viewed. It did not do very well, and I'm not surprised. Everyone in the nation does a recap video. Why? Because it doesn't require any talent. It's very easy to go and look at the box score and say, oh, Alabama lost to Florida State, or they won. They look good. They look bad. You can do good recap shows. They require some effort, which is what we try to do. But if no one's going to watch it, you know the score. You watch the videos. You can go back and watch them if you want. See what the record is. It is what it is. It's all public. Anyway, that's why we didn't do the recap show. Maybe we'll do it in the future as I have more time. I like doing it, but if it's not going to be watched, who knows? Anyway, thank you guys for watching this. Until next time, good luck. We will see you guys later.